The harsh wind whipped dirt and dried grass across the open range as Zara Marshall crumpled to the ground, her once pristine blue dress now torn and stained with days of desperate travel, her supplies long gone and hope fading with the setting sun of the Montana Territory. Kane Keller spotted her from half a mile away, a splash of fabric against the golden prairie that shouldn't have been there. He'd been tracking a mountain lion that had been picking off his calves, but the predator was instantly forgotten as he spurred his chestnut stallion toward the motionless figure. The year was 1878, and finding a woman alone on the edge of his property meant nothing good. "Madam? Madam, can you hear me?" Kane dismounted in a swift, practiced motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the hard-packed earth. He knelt beside her, noting the fever flush on her otherwise pale cheeks, the cracked lips, and the shallow rise and fall of her chest. She was alive, but barely. Zara's eyelids fluttered, revealing striking green eyes clouded with delirium. "Water," she managed to rasp before slipping back into unconsciousness. Kane wasted no time. With gentle hands that belied his rugged appearance, he gathered her slight form into his arms. He was struck by how little she weighed, how fragile she felt against his chest as he mounted his horse with her secured in front of him. The mountains loomed in the distance, snow still capping their peaks despite the late spring season, and his cabin was a good hour's ride away. "Hang on," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Just hang on." The ride back to his cabin was tense, with Kane constantly checking to ensure the woman was still breathing. Each shallow exhale against his arm sent a wave of relief through him. He didn't know who she was or where she'd come from, but out here, that hardly mattered. The frontier had its own code: you help those in need because tomorrow, it might be you dying of thirst under the merciless sky. His cabin came into view as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the clearing. It wasn't much a sturdy one-room structure with a small barn and corral to the side, but it had been his home for the past 3 years since he'd claimed this land. Kane carried her inside, laying her gently on his bed. He worked quickly to remove her dust-covered boots and outer garments, careful to maintain her modesty while making her comfortable. The small stove in the corner still held embers from that morning, and he stoked it back to life before fetching water from the barrel outside. Zara stirred as he pressed a damp cloth to her lips, allowing small drops of water to trickle into her mouth. "Easy," he said softly. "Not too much at once." Her eyes opened again, clearer this time, though confusion still shadowed her face. "Where?" she began. "You're safe," Kane assured her. "My name is Kane Keller. I found you collapsed about 5 miles from here. You're in my cabin now." "Zara," she whispered. "Zara Marshall." Then her eyes closed again as exhaustion claimed her. Throughout the night, Kane sat by her side, regularly checking her temperature and helping her sip water when she woke. By morning, her fever had broken, but she was still too weak to stand. "You've got to eat something," Kane insisted, holding out a bowl of simple broth he'd prepared. The morning sun streamed through the cabin's single window, illuminating dust motes dancing in its beam. Zara managed to sit up, though the effort clearly cost her. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger than the day before. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." Kane just nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. "How'd you end up out there alone?" he asked instead. She took a small sip of broth before answering. "I was traveling with a wagon train from Missouri to Oregon. My aunt and uncle." Her voice faltered. "There was sickness. Cholera. They didn't. I was the only one left from our wagon. The others couldn't wait. Winter comes early in the mountains. They gave me supplies, but you got lost," Kane finished for her. "The landmarks looked nothing like they described. I must have taken a wrong turn. Then my horse went lame, and I had to continue on foot." She shook her head, as if still unable to believe her misfortune. Kane considered her story. The nearest town, Willow Creek, was a 2-day ride. The main trail to Oregon was at least 30 miles north. She'd been severely off course. "You're welcome to stay until you're strong enough to travel," he offered. "Then I can take you to Willow Creek. They've got a stage that runs east once a week." Gratitude shone in her eyes. "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition," Kane cut in. "It's survival. No one makes it alone out here." Over the next few days, Zara regained her strength gradually. Kane hunted, tended his small herd of cattle, and checked his trap lines, always returning to find her a little improved. By the third day, she was able to sit in the chair by the window, watching as he split firewood in the yard, his broad shoulders working rhythmically with each swing of the axe. Zara found herself studying him more than she'd care to admit. Kane Keller was not what she'd expected from a frontier rancher. He was tall and powerfully built, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled at the nape of his neck. But it was his eyes that caught her attention most, deep blue and thoughtful, at odds with his rough exterior. On the fifth day, when Kane returned from checking his trap lines, he found Zara standing at his small stove, stirring a pot of stew. "You shouldn't be up," he admonished, though the cabin smelled better than it had in months. "I was going crazy just sitting," she replied. "Besides, I wanted to repay your kindness somehow." Kane hung his hat on a peg by the door. "You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not," she conceded, "but it feels good to be useful." They ate together that evening, and for the first time, Kane found himself talking about more than just the weather or his daily chores. He told her about coming west after the war, about learning ranching from an old-timer who'd since passed on, about his dreams of expanding his herd. "What about family?" Zara asked. Kane's expression shuddered slightly. "Lost my pa in the war. Ma followed a year later. Heart just gave out. My brother settled in California. Haven't heard from him in years." "I'm sorry," she said simply. He shrugged. "Life goes on. What about you?" "Just your aunt and uncle." Zara nodded. "My parents died when I was 16. Influenza. Aunt Margaret was my mother's sister. She and Uncle Thomas took me in. They were heading to Oregon to start a new life." Her voice trailed off. "And now?" Kane asked gently. "Now I don't know," she admitted. "I have a little money saved, but not enough to start over somewhere new. Not alone." The unspoken question hung in the air between them. Where would she go? As days turned into a week, and then two, neither mentioned Willow Creek or the stage east. Kane found reasons to delay the trip. A fence needed mending. A calf was born early and needed attention. Storm clouds threatened on the horizon. And Zara found reasons to make herself indispensable, cooking meals that made Kane realize how poorly he'd been eating, organizing his chaotic supplies, even helping with the mending he'd neglected. One evening, as they sat on the small porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Kane found himself telling her about his wife, Sarah, who had died in childbirth along with their infant son 5 years earlier. "That's why I came out here," he admitted. "Couldn't stand the sympathetic looks, the well-meaning neighbors. Needed somewhere I could just be." Zara's hand found his in the gathering darkness. "I understand," she said softly. And Kane believed she did. There was something about Zara Marshall that spoke of quiet strength, of someone who had faced loss and continued forward not because it was easy, but because there was no other choice. The next morning, Kane found Zara already outside, feeding the chickens he kept in a small coop near the barn. "I need to ride into Willow Creek for supplies," he announced. "Do you want to come along? Might do you good to see more than just these four walls and my ugly face." Zara smiled, the expression transforming her face in a way that made Kane's breath catch. "Your face isn't ugly, Kane Keller," she said lightly. "But yes, I'd like to come along." The ride to Willow Creek took most of the day. Kane was acutely aware of Zara seated behind him on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist for balance. They'd fashioned her a riding skirt from some old fabric he'd had stored away, and she rode better than he expected for someone raised in the city. Willow Creek was barely more than a wide spot in the trail: a general store, a saloon, a small church, and a handful of cabins. But after weeks at Kane's isolated ranch, it seemed bustling to Zara. "Wait here," Kane told her, helping her down outside the general store. "I need to see a man about some business." "Won't be long." Zara nodded, smoothing her skirt nervously as she took in the dusty main street. A few men loitering outside the saloon tipped their hats to her, their curious gazes following the newcomer. Inside the store, Kane approached the proprietor, a balding man named Edgar Thompson who doubled as the town's postmaster. "Any mail come for me, Edgar?" Kane asked, leaning against the counter. "Been holding a letter for almost a month now," Edgar replied, reaching beneath the counter. "Figured you'd be in eventually." Kane took the envelope, recognizing his brother's handwriting. He tucked it into his pocket to read later. "Need the usual supplies," he said. "And some fabric, if you've got it. Something nice, not just canvas." Edgar raised an eyebrow. Fabric, eh? This have anything to do with the lady waiting outside? Kane's expression remained neutral. Just making a list, Edgar. The older man chuckled. Got some nice calico came in on the last wagon. Blue might suit her. While Kane selected his supplies, Zara wandered to the small church across the street. The door was open, and she stepped inside, welcoming the cool, quiet interior after the bright sunshine. Hello there, a friendly voice greeted her. A middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair was arranging flowers at the altar. Don't believe I've seen you before. I'm just passing through, Zara replied. With Mr. Keller. The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. Kane Keller? Well, that's a surprise. He hardly ever comes to town, and never with company. She extended her hand. I'm Martha Wilson, the preacher's wife. Zara Marshall. Zara introduced herself. It's a lovely church. Small, but it serves our needs, Martha replied. How long have you known Kane? Zara hesitated, uncertain how to explain their unusual situation. Not long, she admitted. He helped me when I was in trouble. Understanding dawned in Martha's kind eyes. That sounds like Kane. Keeps to himself, but he's a good man. Lost his wife some years back, before they came west. Hasn't been the same since. He told me, Zara said softly. Martha looked surprised again. Did he now? That is interesting. She studied Zara thoughtfully. Will you be staying in Willow Creek? I'm not sure yet, Zara replied honestly. I was originally heading to Oregon, but plans change. Indeed they do, Martha agreed. Well, you're welcome at services on Sunday if you're still around. And if you need anything at all, our door is always open. Zara thanked her and stepped back outside to find Kane loading supplies into saddlebags across the street. The letter from his brother burned in his pocket, but he decided to wait until they were back at the cabin to read it. Ready to head back? He asked as Zara approached. She nodded, though her expression was pensive. I met the preacher's wife, she told him as he helped her mount. She seemed very kind. Kane swung up behind her. The Wilsons are good people, he agreed. Preacher helped me build my barn 3 years ago when I first settled here. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of the horses' hooves a soothing backdrop to their thoughts. The sun was beginning its descent when Zara finally spoke again. Kane, she began hesitantly. I've been thinking about what happens next. His arms tightened almost imperceptibly around her as he held the reins. And I can't stay with you forever, she said softly. It isn't proper, and I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, he replied immediately. Even so, she persisted, I need to make plans. Mrs. Wilson mentioned they sometimes need help with the school. I could perhaps stay in town, earn my keep that way. Kane was silent for so long that Zara began to think he hadn't heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Is that what you want? To stay in Willow Creek? Zara twisted slightly to look at him. What I want? She began, then faltered. What I want might not be possible. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a shared longing neither was ready to name. Let's get home first, Kane said at last. Then we can talk about what's possible. Night had fallen by the time they reached the cabin. Kane insisted on taking care of the horse while Zara went inside to start dinner. When he finally entered, he found her standing by the stove, the blue fabric he'd purchased laid out on the table. It's beautiful, she said, running her fingers over the calico. But you shouldn't have wanted to, he cut her off. Thought it would suit you. Zara smiled, the warmth of it reaching her eyes. Thank you. Kane pulled the letter from his pocket and sat at the table. From my brother, he explained as he broke the seal. His eyes scanned the contents quickly, then he looked up at Zara with surprise. He's coming to visit. Says he'll be here in about 2 weeks. That's wonderful news, Zara said, genuinely pleased for him. He's bringing his wife and son. Kane continued, still sounding slightly stunned. Says they're considering moving back east. Wants my opinion. Zara turned back to the stove, stirring the pot of beans and bacon. You must be excited to see them. It's been 6 years, Kane admitted. Didn't part on the best of terms. But he sounds different in his letter. People change, Zara said softly. Life changes them. Kane watched her move around his cabin, so natural and at ease, as if she belonged there. And suddenly, with perfect clarity, he realized that she did that he wanted her to stay, not just for now, but for always. But instead of voicing these thoughts, he asked, "What did you mean earlier? About what you want not being possible?" Zara stilled, her back to him. "I meant." She took a deep breath and turned to face him. "I meant that I've grown fond of this place, of this life." Her eyes met his directly. "Of you." Kane stood slowly, closing the distance between them. "I'm not an easy man, Zara. Set in my ways. Too used to being alone." "I know," she replied simply. "And you still—" "Yes," she interrupted. "I still—" He reached for her then, his calloused hand cupping her cheek with unexpected tenderness. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he confessed. "After Sarah, I figured that part of me was dead and buried. And now," Zara prompted, hardly daring to breathe, "now I think maybe life's giving me a second chance." He leaned forward, his lips finding hers in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened as she responded. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Kane rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not in Willow Creek. Here. With me." "As what?" Zara asked, needing to hear him say it. Kane smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his weathered face. "As my wife, if you'll have me." "Are you certain?" she asked. "We've known each other such a short time." "I'm certain I don't want to know what it's like here without you anymore," he replied honestly. "The rest, we'll figure out together." Zara's answer was to kiss him again, her arms winding around his neck as his encircled her waist, pulling her close. The beans burned that night, but neither of them cared. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Kane and Zara rode back to Willow Creek to speak with Preacher Wilson, who agreed to marry them the following Sunday. Martha Wilson was delighted, immediately taking Zara under her wing and helping her prepare for both the wedding and the impending visit from Kane's brother. "It's like God's perfect timing," Martha declared as she helped Zara alter an old wedding dress of her daughter's. "Kane's family arriving just after your wedding." Zara smiled, thinking of how much had changed in just a few short weeks. From near death on the prairie to becoming a bride, life was indeed unpredictable. Kane, meanwhile, threw himself into improving the cabin. He added a small lean-to room for privacy, replaced the leaky roof, and even whitewashed the exterior. His nearest neighbor, old Jim Packer, rode over one day to find out what all the commotion was about. "Getting married, eh?" Jim chuckled after Kane explained. "Knew something was different when I saw smoke from your chimney every day. Usually only see it once a week when you're cooking up your beans." Kane grinned, not even embarrassed by the teasing. "She's a good woman, Jim. I got lucky." "That you did, son. That you did." The older man surveyed the improvements to the cabin. "Need help with anything?" "Been a while since I had a good reason to swing a hammer." Together, they built a proper bed frame to replace Kane's old bedroll and a table with matching chairs for the kitchen area. By the time Sunday arrived, the cabin looked more like a home than it ever had. The wedding was small but joyful. Most of Willow Creek turned out for the event, curious to see the woman who had captured the reclusive rancher's heart. Zara wore the altered wedding dress with the blue calico Kane had purchased fashioned into a sash around her waist. Kane, uncomfortable in his Sunday best, couldn't take his eyes off her. "Do you, Kane Keller, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Preacher Wilson asked. "I do," Kane replied, his voice steady and sure. "And do you, Zara Marshall, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Zara answered, squeezing Kane's hands. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." The small church erupted in cheers as Kane pulled Zara into a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. The ride back to their cabin, their home, was filled with a contented silence, both lost in thoughts of the future they would build together. As they crested the final hill and the cabin came into view, Kane reined in his horse. "What is it?" Zara asked, looking at the cabin glowing golden in the late afternoon sun. "Just wanted to remember this moment," Kane replied. "The first time I bring my wife home." Zara leaned back against him, her heart full. "It's perfect." Later that night, as they lay together in their new bed, Zara traced patterns on Kane's chest. "I never thought I'd find happiness again after losing my family," she admitted. "I was just trying to survive." Kane caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Same here. Wasn't living, just existing." He propped himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "You've brought me back to life, Zara Keller." She smiled at her new name. As you did for me, quite literally. A week later, Kane's brother Keith arrived with his wife Eleanor and their 5-year-old son Thomas. The reunion was emotional, years of distance and unspoken regrets finally addressed and forgiven. I can't believe you beat me to it. Keith laughed as they sat around the fire that evening, the women preparing dinner while young Thomas explored the cabin with wide-eyed curiosity. Always figured you'd stay a hermit forever. Kane watched Zara showing Thomas how to properly set the table. Never planned on it changing, he admitted. But life had other ideas. Keith followed his brother's gaze. She's good for you. I can see that already. Better than I deserve, Kane agreed. Nonsense, Keith clapped him on the shoulder. You deserve happiness, brother. Always have. The visit stretched from the planned few days into 2 weeks, with the brothers reconnecting and their wives forming a fast friendship. Keith and Eleanor decided not to move back east after all, instead purchasing land near Willow Creek with Kane's help. Family should stick together, Keith declared. We've been apart too long. By the time they left to return to California and prepare for their move, plans were already in motion for a joint ranching venture between the brothers. Kane's small herd would be the foundation, with Keith bringing additional cattle when they returned permanently. As summer turned to fall, Zara and Kane settled into a rhythm of work and togetherness that suited them both. The cabin continued to transform curtains at the windows now, a small garden established, flowers planted along the walkway. Kane even commissioned a proper sign for the entrance to their property, Circle K Ranch. One crisp October morning, as Kane prepared to ride out to check the herd, Zara stopped him with a hand on his arm. I have something to tell you, she said, her eyes shining. Kane looked at her questioningly. I'm going to have a baby, she announced. In the spring. For a moment, Kane couldn't speak, memories of Sarah and their lost child threatening to overwhelm him. But then he saw the joy on Zara's face, the love and hope there, and he pulled her into his arms. A baby, he whispered against her hair. Our baby. Are you happy? She asked, sensing his complicated emotions. Happier than I ever thought possible, he assured her, and meant it. The past was the past. This was their future. That night, as they sat on their porch watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Montana sky, Kane marveled at how completely his life had changed in just a few short months. What are you thinking about? Zara asked, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. About the day I found you, he replied. How close I came to missing you completely. If I decided to track that mountain lion in a different direction. But you didn't, she reminded him. You found me when I needed you most. Kane took her hand in his. And now I can't imagine life without you. Zara leaned her head against his shoulder. You won't have to, she promised. Ever. As the first snow of winter dusted the mountains in the distance, Kane Keller held his wife close, grateful beyond words for the woman who had stumbled into his life and stayed to share it. What had begun as an act of basic human kindness, carrying a faint body to safety, had blossomed into a love neither had been looking for, but both had desperately needed. And as their child grew within Zara, so too did their dreams for the future, dreams of family, of prosperity, of a life built together day by day, season by season, year by year. On the wild frontier where survival was never guaranteed, they had found something rare and precious, a second chance at happiness, a love strong enough to heal old wounds and forge a new beginning. For Kane and Zara Keller of the Circle K Ranch, the greatest adventure was just beginning.